The film begins in a dark, hopeless city where it constantly rains. Detective William Somerset, played by Morgan Freeman, is an experienced officer nearing retirement, weary from years of fighting crime and corruption. He has lost faith in the system and believes the city cannot be redeemed. The opening sequence shows Somerset's meticulous routine. Every move he makes is calculated. He is a methodical man who contrasts sharply with the chaos of the city. Detective David Mills, played by Brad Pitt, is a young, energetic officer recently transferred to the city. Moving with his wife, Mills is ambitious and idealistic, eager to make a difference by fighting crime. The two detectives meet at the scene of a gruesome murder. Somerset quickly senses that this is no ordinary case. Their contrasting personalities become apparent. Somerset questions Mills' inexperience, while Mills is determined to prove himself. The first crime scene is horrifying. A man is found dead under a table, having been forced to eat until his stomach burst. Around him are buckets of spoiled food. Somerset carefully examines the scene. The victim's hands were tied, his head hung low, and signs of vomiting are evident. The autopsy confirms that the man's stomach exploded. Somerset realizes this is not just a murder, but a statement. The killer has punished the man for the sin of gluttony. Somerset insists that this case is far more complex than it seems. Mills dismisses this view, arguing that catching the killer should be their priority. Somerset investigates the victim's home, studying books and other details. Meanwhile, Mills views the killer as a weak individual and criticizes Somerset's cautious approach. The second murder takes place in a luxurious office belonging to a wealthy lawyer. The killer forces the man to carve the word greed into his own body with his blood, leaving him to die. Somerset investigates the lawyer's life, discovering that the victim had a reputation for taking morally questionable cases driven by greed. The killer's message is clear. The victim deserved to die because of his greed. Somerset and Mills meticulously analyze the clues left at the scene. Somerset concludes the killer is a highly intelligent and patient individual, someone who has meticulously planned these murders over a long period. Mills becomes frustrated by Somerset's calm demeanor and argues that urgency is paramount. Somerset, however, warns that rushing could lead to mistakes. Somerset delves into literature and religious texts, realizing the killer's methodology is inspired by historical and theological references. He studies Dante's Divine Comedy, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, and Milton's Paradise Lost. Believing the killer may have read these books, Somerset begins investigating local libraries. Mills, in contrast, focuses on using modern technology and tactics to find the killer. For the first time, the two detectives begin working effectively as a team. Though tensions persist, Somerset's patient, methodical style clashes with Mills' impulsive and action-driven nature. In a decrepit apartment, the detectives discover a horrific scene. A man who has been chained to a bed for years, subjected to starvation and psychological torment. The word sloth is scrawled on the wall. Initially, the detectives believe the victim is dead. To their shock, he is still alive, barely clinging to life. The killer's cruelty and patience are evident. He has tortured the victim for years, turning him into a living symbol of the sin of sloth. This case deeply shakes Mills, who is visibly disturbed by the level of suffering inflicted. Somerset reflects on the killer's intention to make society confront its sins. By now, the detectives fully grasp that the killer is following a deliberate philosophy, punishing victims for embodying the 7 deadly sins: gluttony, greed, sloth, lust, pride, envy, and wrath. Somerset attempts to predict the sequence of murders, believing the sins will be addressed one by one. They investigate connections between the victims, realizing the killer targets individuals he deems morally corrupt. The killer's brilliance becomes more apparent, unsettling both detectives. Mills, however, grows increasingly impatient. frustrated by their inability to stop him. A gruesome murder occurs at a nightclub. A prostitute is killed with a weapon designed by the killer, forcing another man to commit the act. Witnesses and the coerced killer are too traumatized to provide coherent information. Mills is outraged and demands swift action to capture the killer. Somerset, though equally disturbed, remains calm and focused on gathering clues. This scene highlights the psychological toll the killer inflicts, not only on his victims but also on those he manipulates. In the apartment of a model, another chilling murder takes place. The victim is given a choice: drink acid and survive disfigured, or die. She chooses death over losing her beauty. Somerset and Mills analyze the killer's pattern, noting that he forces his victims to confront their sins in a deeply personal and symbolic way. Somerset theorizes that the murders are not just punishments, but a twisted form of moral judgment. Mills, however, rejects this view, accusing Somerset of trying to understand the killer. To the detective's shock, the killer, John Doe, played by Kevin Spacey, walks into the police station covered in blood and calmly confesses. His surrender is baffling, as two sins, envy and wrath, remain. Doe offers to lead them to the final two victims. Somerset suspects this is a trap, but Mills insists on taking the chance to end the case. The tension between the two detectives intensifies. Doe leads the detectives to a desolate field outside the city, where the film reaches its unforgettable climax. A delivery truck arrives, carrying a package. Somerset opens it and discovers a horrifying truth. Inside is the severed head of Mills' wife, Tracy, played by Gwyneth Paltrow. Doe reveals that he envied Mills's life and happiness, admitting to the sin of envy. Enraged and overcome with grief, Mills shoots Doe, completing the cycle by committing the sin of wrath. Mills is taken into custody, shattered by his actions and the loss of his wife. Doe's plan has succeeded. All 7 sins have been punished. Somerset, disillusioned yet resolute, decides to postpone his retirement, realizing he cannot abandon the fight against the city's darkness. The film closes with Somerset quoting Hemingway, "The world is a fine place and worth fighting for." He adds, "I agree with the second part.